So I missed the introduction. But I take it I should start?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Before the
Yes, I'm.
Is this muted? No, mute this. It was. No, that's mute.
I talk right now.
sorry, folks.
No, it's us. Does anyone else?
Okay. So how about now? You can hear. Thank you, Allison. She gave me the thumbs up. So I will now do my introduction, but take a moment to remind all of our New Jersey attendees that tomorrow, June 2nd, is the primary. And if you haven't done it already, be sure to vote. In the fall of 2016, I believe, my husband and I went on our first civil rights trip through Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. It was on that trip that I met Allison Thomas, tonight's speaker. Allison was traveling with a group called Coming to the Table, which brings together descendants of enslavers and enslaved, and of course, some people were both. Allison has served CTTT on its board and in other capacities. It was so interesting to hear about Allison's early family research, and tonight we all get to hear a much fuller report about the results of her research. Allison descends from enslavers in colonial Virginia. She has been researching her family history since 2013 and connecting with descendants of people enslaved by her family since 2016. She is currently writing about her journey to reckon with her true family history, connect with linked descendants, and collaborate on reparative actions. She has worked with her linked descendants to gain approval for a historic highway marker very recently dedicated about the Black community on Gwynns Island in Matthews County in southeastern Virginia. Allison's professional career has spanned government, working for Jimmy Carter and Jerry Brown, high-tech PR, working for Steve Jobs and Next Computer, and producing for film and theater. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Allison Thomas.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share the slides here, see if this works. Okay, it'll come on in a second. All right, can everybody see that? Speak up if you can't, because I can no longer see you.
I see it.
Okay. So actually, Linda, we went on that pilgrimage in the fall of 2017 because it was after Donald Trump had been elected. So it was quite an experience revisiting that history after that time. Okay, let me make sure I've got my cursor in the right place. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to give a slightly different version of this talk than I've given in the past, but we'll have lots of time for questions, so feel free to ask anything. I just know that your group, because of knowing Linda, I know your group's been meeting for a long time. You've studied a lot of this information and history of the United States and history of New Jersey of enslavement. And I wanted to kind of bring it back to a more personal connection. Um, but we'll have lots of time for questions. So, why did I first start looking into my family history? Well, it was 2013, 2014, and I was on the verge of separating from my husband of almost 30 years. I have boy-girl twins who were off to college, and I just found myself in this place that I didn't know how I got there. I never anticipated getting divorced. That was not part of my plan. And I felt fairly isolated. I lived in Los Angeles. Most of my family lived on the East Coast. Um, so I decided, and in reflection, I thought I'm caught in a pattern of behavior. My parents had an extremely contentious marriage, although they never divorced. My father moved our family 3,000 miles away from both sets of grandparents. When we moved to LA, we were following his job opportunities. So I had almost no relationship with my grandparents. I didn't really know my aunts, uncles, cousins. We didn't go to family reunions. We lacked all that kind of infrastructure that a lot of people have. And then you add to this that my family on both sides were always feuding with each other. There was high level of paranoia on my mom's side, and people weren't allowed to talk to each other. On my dad's side, my dad had two brothers. None of the wives of the three boys got along. It was a mess. So I thought, well, I really could use family right now, but I also would like to understand the roots of this pattern, and maybe I can break that pattern. And as it happened on my dad's side in particular, genealogy was a point of connection. So I began by researching my family history. And as Linda said, and I think you all have seen my film that I did for Speaking Truth that talked a lot about this legacy of descending from Robert King Carter. Um, So when people ask me to introduce myself, I always say descend from enslavers back to colonial Virginia. And this is the guy. He's my seventh great grandfather. I like showing both of these pictures because usually it's the one on the right that's shown, and he looks so formal and, kind of distinguished. And on the other side, he looks like just this fop. I mean, he's kind of a degenerate in some ways, but obviously extremely wealthy. And he loves that wig. So, the King Carter that I knew about, and he was named King because of his arrogance, but I'm sure it was a name that he liked. He certainly didn't repudiate it. So, I knew that he died in 1732, the richest man in Virginia, and maybe in all the colonies. He enslaved 1,000 people. Now, this was at the moment of his death. They inventoried almost 1,000 people. He likely enslaved even more if you add up people that he had purchased and enslaved during his lifetime. He owned 300,000 acres of land, and he died with 10,000 British pounds, which is about 3 million today. All of this was stolen. Obviously the people were kidnapped from Africa. Most of the land was stolen from Lord Fairfax of Virginia, who was shocked when Carter died to find out how much he had taken from him. And same with the money, which was from selling tobacco primarily. But I got an MBA out here from USC, and I always kind of admired the innovative business practices of Carter. And he was well known for these, and he promulgated these practices widely. I mean, this is kind of when enslavement is still being codified. People are still trying to figure out what to do, how to manage people on this massive scale. You don't have the size of plantations that you had later in the Deep South around cotton, where you had each plantation had 1,000 people. Carter divided his people up into groups of 20 to 25, and he had about 30 to 40 plantations throughout Tidewater, Virginia. So he was the first to actually build cabins for enslaved people, and he added these elevated beds so that people were no longer sleeping on the dirt. Seems kind of basic, but that had to be invented. He built in seasoning time. So when he acquired kidnapped Africans off the ship, he gave them a couple of months to adjust to the Virginia climate. And he increased food during busy seasons, planting and harvesting. But these were all practices designed to keep his enslaved people alive, which was something that had never really occurred to me when I learned this history as a kid. Like I wrote papers about Carter, and my kids wrote papers about Carter. We just didn't talk about this part of it. And I think that's true of a lot of families. Here's some of the things I didn't know. So when kidnapped Africans came off the boat, Carter gave them Christian names. He did this for inventory purposes. And you'll see, I call this the second theft. So you've already had people stolen from their homelands, and then they arrive in Virginia and their names are stolen. And the names represent their religion, their family history, the community they came from, all that kind of heritage. And this chart on the right is an inventory of the enslaved people and other property that Carter had broken down by plantation at the time of his death. And you'll see Negroes at the top. And these folks all have Christian names: Charles, Nora, Tom, Peter, a lot of Peters, Harry, Robin, Bess. And so that's how people were renamed. And this really didn't sink into me until I watched the remake of Roots, which was more accurately portrayed the violence of enslavement. And Kunta Kinte is whipped mercilessly by the overseer because he will not answer to the name Toby. And that's when it really sunk in for me. I mean, I guess I was a little dense, I didn't really think about it until I saw that scene. And then, of course, on this list, and I found this list at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, you also see that it has Negroes and then it has hogs, 35 in all, 30 sheep, and at the bottom, an old mare named Spot with two T's. So obviously, we're not distinguishing between Black people and animals. So Carter, it gets worse. He punished freedom seekers with mutilation. So one of the reasons I have some of this document is because the Christ Church in Weems, Virginia, has taken all of Carter's writings. He was very prolific, and for some reason they didn't disappear or weren't burned when his home plantation burned down. They have letters and journals. They're not 100% complete, but they give us an incredible insight into the institution of slavery during this early time. And Carter, when an enslaved person ran away multiple times, they were considered incorrigible, and he would go to court and ask for permission to cut off the toes on one foot. So I should have given you a trigger warning. This is pretty disturbing. Of course, Carter did this through the courts. The courts always gave him permission, and then his doctor would conduct the mutilation. He always had that arm's length remove, and he considered this the best technique for reclaiming the said Negroes. It says they're reclaiming, which I find to be a really fascinating kind of wild word to use. And he calls it dismembering the Negroes by cutting off their toes. And this practice, he promulgated it widely. Virginia law changed in order to make it legal so that if you accidentally killed an enslaved person in your charge when you cut off their toes, you were not considered guilty. That was allowed. So I always thought of Virginians, it's the upper South, maybe not quite as violent as other states, but in fact, the Virginians were incredibly brutal, far more violent than other states. Oh, and the practice was legalized in 1705. So Edmund Morgan kind of captures the whole brutality of enslavement when he says that in order to get work out of men and women who had nothing to gain but the absence of pain, you had to be willing to beat, maim, and kill. And King Carter and others did all those things. The third thing, and it's not just the third thing, but this is the one that really hit me hard, was when I discovered that King Carter was a sales agent for British slave ships. He only invested in one voyage himself. He considered it too risky, so that in all of his early biographies, that's what they talk about, which I thought meant there was no way he was a trafficker. But in fact, he routinely acted as a sales agent for British ships. And this is a section of his diary from September 1727. And he calls himself a Negro seller. At the time, that's what they called themselves. And it was a badge of honor. Only wealthy merchants could be Negro sellers. You had to be able to carry the credit because people would generally purchase people against future tobacco crops. So there were these notes of exchange. It's not a cash business generally. But I wanted to highlight a couple elements of this diary, and I went and requested this. I found at the University of Virginia. University of Virginia, you can see that he writes, there's no real blotting, nothing seems to disturb him. He is dipping that pen in and out of ink, but it flows pretty smoothly. So on Sunday the 17th, he goes to church and they killed a veal for dinner that night. On the 18th, he begins selling the Negroes, 28th, the first day. And he goes on to talk about the weather and how many he sold and when he comes home. On the 20th, he says, fine warm day, went aboard the Negro ship about 1 o'clock, sold 4 Negroes. And then on the 21st, he begins a pattern, and this continues on in the diary. It says he talks about the weather. It's very warm. He had an uneasy night. He talks about how little he slept. He got aboard the Negro ship, sold 9, and then ate a leg and wing of chicken, 6 glasses of wine, slept broken but easy. And his sleep gets worse and worse throughout this period. So we learn a lot about him, but nothing about the people he's selling. We don't know age, sex, name, certainly not. He probably is only naming the people that he purchases, and he does generally tend to take the best ones from any cargo that he's working on. Ironically, Carter dies of dysentery that people believed at the time he caught on board a ship, a slave ship. So I kind of love that irony. He deserved it. So I started speculating as this sank in. This was obviously deeply disturbing to read. And I thought, well, if Carter is a sales agent, I wonder how many of my other seventh great grandfathers are sales agents. And I quickly Googled the name of one, Braxton, into the index at the university, at the Christ Church Library. And I discovered, sure enough, the first one I entered popped right up. And I went and found this advertisement. This is my other seventh great grandfather, George Braxton. So Carter's 11th child, Mary, a daughter, married George Braxton's son, who was also George Braxton, and that both Georges were slave traders. So this is what it would look like. August 4th, 1739, just arrived in York River, the ship, Prince of Orange. He names the commander with 200 and odd choice slaves in all caps, the days of sale. So he's selling the 200 at York on the 10th of August and at West Point, which is in a different county across on the other side of the Rappahannock, on the other side of the York. It's both sides of the York River, basically, on Wednesday the 15th. So by this point in time, obviously, Virginia, if not the entire United States, is considered a slave society. And I like David Blight, the Yale Civil War historian, and his way of describing this, that everyone, whether or not they were enslavers themselves, grew up, were socialized by, married, reared children, worked, invested in, and honed their most basic values under the influence of a system that said it was just to own people as property. And obviously, as you all know, the benefits of enslavement reached into finance, insurance, transportation, clothing. This isn't a Southern thing. Everyone in the North is wearing clothing made with cotton picked in the South. So all Americans are complicit. So this legacy of cruelty and brutality continued in my family. Carter's grandson signed the Declaration of Independence and himself fathered a son with an enslaved woman, and he freed both the mother and son, according to Black oral history in 1780. And you do find the son living as a free person of color in 1810. My great-great-grandfather raped an enslaved woman, it's a family pattern, sold her and her child 500 miles south from Virginia to Georgia in the 1850s. So this second bullet is part of the domestic slave trade when so many African Americans were sold south, from the upper South to the deep South and beyond, starting in 1808. Thomas Jefferson could have outlawed domestic slavery, but he chose not to because he would have lost too much money. He had more money in slaves than he did in anything else. And then my third great grandmother during the Civil War felt she could just kidnap a child to prevent the child's mother from running to Union lines in 1863. So King Carter is cutting off the toes, and my third great grandmother's kidnapping children. It's hard to even evaluate what's worse. So So one of the questions I always had is how do people possibly treat each other this way? And it really does seem unfathomable, especially to us today. And what we have learned is that the greed came first. Thank God for capitalism, huh? And then the belief in the racial theory of hierarchy developed after enslavement. So the notion that white people were superior to Africans or European descended people were superior to Africans really came later in the 1700s than the practice of enslavement. And whiteness wasn't even ever named in any kind of court ruling or legal legislation until 1691 in Virginia. I mean, it's really relatively late. If you think that the first enslaved people came to Virginia in 1619, about 90 years before. So the superiority of whiteness was used to justify the dehumanization, objectification, and brutalization of enslaved people. And today we see the ripple effects of these attitudes. Even in my family initially, I have relatives who deny any kind of responsibility to repair the harm of our ancestors. They just say it's just the way it was. Can't we face forward? Of course, you can't face forward if the harms are continuing to be committed today, which they are because of the structural racism in our society. We have founding myths like work hard and you'll be successful, which means that if you're not successful, you must be lazy. So we have all these ways to destroy our empathy, right? We're not going to take we don't even want to feel the harm that was committed by our ancestors, much less take any kind of responsibility to repair it. We don't want to feel sympathetic for someone who works really hard and doesn't succeed because of because of systemic racism or unconscious racism. Emotions continue to be compartmentalized and suppressed. You know, if you feel everything in our world today, it's pretty tough to get out of bed in the morning. And then we prioritize individuals over community. So our self-interest is routinely prioritized over the interests of the group, the nation, the planet. And we see that especially now with the plutocracy that's playing out in our country. And I could see the internal cost of this legacy in my family. So greed. When I asked my father why he never divorced my mother, he said, I didn't want to give her half of my money. There's so much in that statement that's wrong. I know that I was utterly speechless when he said that. I mean, the fact that it's my money, he doesn't acknowledge my mother's role in raising me and my brother and our family. You know, he earned everything by himself. He doesn't want to share. I mean, it's really the essence of greed. There were other ways he was generous, but not in that way. And he believed that his wealth and success was achieved by himself. So he was not a philanthropic or generous person. And he didn't even acknowledge the advantages he was given through tax policy and other things that benefited him. And he always put his job and his work ahead of family. So that's pretty typical of men of that era. But as I said, he moved his family 3,000 miles away in order to get away from his parents. So how can this harm be repaired? And we can talk a lot more about this, but I just thought I'd hit a few examples. The first step really is to excavate and reckon with the unvarnished history of my family, to learn everything that happened and to come to terms with it, and which is painful. And every time you think you've gotten through all the pain, I found I would learn something new. There was a whole nother set of pain. We set about restoring the history of the Black community on Gwen's Island, as Linda referenced. That was Gwen's Island and southeastern Virginia is where my family enslaved people during the Civil War. And I have my third great grandmother's diary, so I felt that was a good place to do more. And I was able to connect with descendants of people in my family enslaved through ancestry.com initially, and then it broadened out from there. So we've had 3 gatherings of all the descendants of the Black community of Gwen's Island. It's significant because the white community in 1916 drove the Black community off the island. And to this day, not a single Black person lives on the island unless they're passing. I've heard 2 stories of people passing. So we brought together 3 reunions. It began with about 15 to 20 people. And 2 weeks ago, we had 175 people. And then we did worked with the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, on a highway marker, which we just unveiled on May 23rd. We ran into considerable opposition. Took 3 years of research to even apply for that marker, and then it took 2 years to get the marker approved because of the local opposition by folks affiliated with the Sons of Confederate Veterans. That's a whole other presentation. There's something I call justice genealogy practice. Actually, one of my Black cousins calls it this, and that's where you do deep genealogy and provide documents to Black people who descend from people I enslaved, or my family enslaved, or we're linked through slavery. We don't necessarily have a DNA match, but often, unfortunately, white families hold the keys to some of these family trees. And then I made a decision to spend down my inheritance that I gained from home ownership in particular. Not just my inheritance, but also the sale of 2 homes after my divorce. But I have to say, I am much richer today than I was. My white family has actually become reunited through the collective work we've done on repairing the harms of our ancestors. There are factions within our family who now all came together. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we were all together. We had 20 people at the table, family members who had fallen out or didn't know each other or had various rifts in the family, and now we're all back together. It's very satisfying and pretty cool. We ranged in age from 25 to 98. And then our family has also expanded to include linked descendants, so people that we have gotten to know through these research projects or with whom we share DNA. And then I've become deeply involved with racial justice groups in Los Angeles and Richmond. I have many, many, many new friends and colleagues through that work that we're doing together to try to make systemic change. There is one drawback, and I don't want to be too rosy about some of this. I definitely have lost friendships as a result of this work, partly because my politics have deeply radicalized, also because my awareness of white privilege is so acute that some of my friends who do not seem to be self-aware I'm less close to now today. And there's examples I can give, but there is that small cost, but it's, to me, completely worth it. And here is a little bit of a picture of some of our coming together. So in the lower left, that is me with my cousin Leroy Dawson. Leroy and I are half-third cousins. We connected on Ancestry, and it was his oral history that helped us piece it together. Above him is me with Elsie Williams. It was Elsie's idea to fight for a highway marker to recognize the Gwens Island community. In the middle there is Leroy standing with my extended family. So that's my Uncle Jim, my dad's younger brother. On the left, Leroy, my brother, Chip, and then my first cousin, Ginger. Next to that is I'm standing in front of the Cherry Coke Plantation, which was a Braxton plantation. It is still in the Braxton family. And I'm there with Viola Baskerville, who's another cousin of mine. And we connected through our DNA and family history about descending from Carter Braxton, who signed the Declaration of Independence. Below that is a group of us from just this latest gathering around the reunion, but these are folks who are from Richmond, Virginia. Viola's in the middle, and on the left is a very well-known genealogist from that area, beside Cawthorn White. And then in the middle is a picture taken in 2023 with all of us who are working on getting the highway marker, and that was at our reunion that year. And you see a lot of happy faces, and we all worked very hard together. So I'm going to see if I can stop sharing. Oh, here, I have to do it this way. And then I've got breakout questions, but I was going to do this later. Come on. Help. I think one of you can stop sharing too,
Okay, I'll do that just a second.
because it's not releasing me.
I've released you.
Okay, I'll go back into Zoom. My computer still is just showing a blank screen. Let's see if I can make this.
Okay. Well, we can see you.
Okay, well, go ahead then.
Did you want to did you want to offer time for a Q&A?
Yes,
before we
please,
wanted to-
because I think we
Okay.
have plenty of time, don't we?
Great. Does anybody either in the virtual or in-person audience have any questions for Ms. Thomas? Okay, great. Thanks. Linda will bring you the microphone if you could just wait, otherwise she won't be able to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Wouldn't it have solved the problem if the released enslaved Black Americans were given the 40 acres and a mule they were promised? Wouldn't that have settled the matter of reparations? And isn't that what should have been done historically?
Well, I think it would have been a great first step. The question would have been how long they would have been allowed to keep that land. Because during Jim Crow, we saw a lot of folks being thrown off their land. But anyway, it's a coulda, woulda, shoulda. Sure, that would have been great.
Thank you. Carol Watchler has a question. Please go ahead and just speak.
Hi. This is just amazing because I'm working with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice in their Reparations Council report. But the question that I have personally is where this really affects me is my family was from Southwest Minnesota, and I'm certain that that land was land that was confiscated from indigenous peoples. And there's another incident in my family history where two people who didn't know each other but were actually related were responsible for the hanging of an indigenous person. So that's and I haven't gone back to work on that, but this is really inspiring me to do that. So thank you.
One of the reasons I am a big fan of coming to the table is I think this kind of work is hard to do by yourself. It's emotionally exhausting and trying, and it's helpful to have people to share your feelings with, as well as to give you genealogical tips on how to track stuff down. And so there is a linked descendants group through Coming to the Table, as well as the Coming to the Table regular meetings. I don't know if they have a New Jersey group, and you have this group, but I think that doing this work in community is really important. So I would
Thank you.
advise you.
Oh, hi, I have the mic. So thank you so much for your work. It's inspiring. I have old family documents and a will that my fourth or fifth great grandfather, it's the division of the 12 Negroes and they all go different places to different people.
Mm-hmm.
And from Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
from central Missouri, the Ozarks area.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is how to look further. What are the techniques? I started with ancestry, but it's pretty opaque to me. But
what year was the will written?
1851.
Okay, so that's pretty
before
good.
the war. Yeah.
Right. So there's an 1860 slave census, which you can sometimes match up with that, and it shows you if your family, where how folks were distributed or where they went. You're going to have to do the trees of each of the people who inherited those enslaved people. But then the next thing is to go to 1870. So 1870 is the first census that records the name and age of enslaved people or Black people, freed people at that point. So if you look at your white family's census records, if you go up or down 10 listings, it's called Nettie's rule. I don't know who Nettie was, but that's what they call it. If you have Black people living in proximity of your relatives, their names might connect with that will document. And that's what I found. I found an 1849, an 1851 estate division. I was able to connect some names with people who showed up in 1870 or with their children. Because sometimes it'll say Maria and child, or old Dolly and young Dolly, or Harriet and young Dolly. They have different ways of putting it. But the 1870 census, often people will come back to where they were enslaved, even if they have didn't stay there throughout the entire war, right? So in my case, the Union pulled up to my third great grandmother's dock and liberated all of her enslaved people. And they were probably all moved to Fort Monroe, but a big chunk of them came back because that's home. and they knew the waterways. They were oystermen and watermen, and so they came back. And we were able to take the 1870 census, and then I could tell who was related to whom because they regroup in family groupings, and you could see who their children were. So between the 1870 census, the 1860 slave census, and the will, sometimes you can draw those lines. But the
Thanks,
other part
Barbara.
of it is, have you taken DNA
Linda.
as well? Some of these links can also be figured out through DNA. So that's the other way to go.
I'm going to present.
Barbara, go ahead online. Barbara Figgy Fox.
Yes, so did I miss hearing where you put the money that you donated from your house sale wealth? And what suggestions would you have for where to put the money for somebody who wants to donate, who does not want to go through the process of finding the actual individuals?
Right. So that's a great point. So there's different kinds of repair. I've done some instances of individual to individual stuff when there's been a particular need, but my family, it never has felt quite right to, and some people set up college scholarships and things like that. Those take a lot to administer. So I opened what's called a donor advised fund at two foundations, one in Richmond, Virginia, and one in Los Angeles. I originally was going to do everything in Virginia, but my kids were like, we grew up in LA, there's racism here. And then I decided to focus initially on housing as an area of injustice that directly related to the assets I was selling. And I just did research on local groups. If you join a good community foundation, which for me, both Liberty Hill and the Community Foundation of Richmond were, they will give you advice and say, these are the groups. So I said I wanted to do Black-led groups. I want to help first-time home buyers or help people stay in their homes or, whatever it may be. And they gave me the advice. Of course, it's now expanded to being investing in land trusts, tenant unions, organizing, all kinds of homeless related services because in LA it's such a mess, and it's also fire relief. The Altadena fire targeted, was so heavily felt on the Black community. So I'm focusing on that right now rather than the big housing agencies. So I think part of it is I always thought that criminal justice reform and housing were the two priorities. I've also added Black maternal health because the Black maternal health outcomes are so much lower. And often it's supporting small Black-led groups who are training people as doulas and midwives. It's one of the best ways to address some of these problems. So obviously the need is great and it's hard to figure that out, but that's been my approach.
Thank you. And a follow-up but intrusive question. In what ways has your being poorer affected you?
Well, first of all, I'm retired. My kids have gotten through college. I own my house. I don't have a lot of expenses. So I've just decided rather than, adding a second story or, you can go to Europe the cheap way or the expensive way. I just am somewhat frugal. And I did work with my financial planner. Right now, it feels like we're in the middle of the apocalypse. So I went back to my financial advisor last fall and said, I think I need to move money faster. Can we really do that full plan? Like, when do the actuaries think you're going to live until? And we ran all those numbers, and factored in Social Security and blah, 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 all that stuff. And I was able to increase the giving for the next 3 years. So
Thank you for the answer. That's inspiring.
thank you.
Turn. We met 9 years ago, and it's a pleasure hearing. I'm
Hi,
Bob, and it's a pleasure hearing how you filled out the little pieces of the story that began as little pieces of what you wanted to do, and this is wonderful. Now, it's a hypothetical that I'm going to ask you, but it may not be a hypothetical. So you present suppose you're in my hypothetical, you're in a place and someone responds with a heroic story of their descent from the Union Army and how virtuous and all the wonderful things they did and this and that, which of course does not, well, I won't answer the question, but I would like to know how you respond.
I mean, when someone's talking about their white ancestors that have done all these great things?
No, what? Not whiteness, not whiteness.
Okay.
You presented a story of descent from enslavers,
Right.
and someone else could present a story of the heroic actions of their Union ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond if you've had that happen?
Well, I've tried to, I'm not sure I'm great at this, to be honest, but I try to really talk about how the legacy of slavery continues today. And therefore we are all complicit because we all benefit from the way it works today, and it doesn't work for everybody. So it doesn't really matter. Isn't that great? That's great. You've got a lineage of public service. So I guess I would say in that case, so how are you gonna, follow through on that today? But people have to do their history. They have to learn the history of the United States and understand how these, and I didn't include those slides about, white inherited wealth versus black inherited wealth and the, high percentage of black people who are incarcerated compared to other ethnic groups, et cetera, in homeless populations. I mean, the data is so clear and so disturbing that I try to kind of have folks understand that the status quo doesn't work for everybody. I guess that would be the thing. And so this notion, and we hear this more and more now, we don't want to go back. We know MAGA is ridiculous because what are we going, it's a fantasy what they're going back to, but it's not that the status quo is working right now. Look at our country. Our levels of inequality are higher than ever. So trying to get people to understand that even if you have been on the right side, it doesn't mean there isn't more to do today. And probably we understand more about what we need to do today, I think. Does that help, Bob?
Well, my answer to myself is the fact that I have Union ancestors does not in any way make me personally less responsible. They did what they did, and I have a pride in it. In a way, it's numbing because I don't have to look at this the way you have to look at it. I don't have to say, wait, I have this in my background. Right.
You have to work harder. And I have friends who descend from enslavers, but they will find that one ancestor who's the abolitionist. I also descend from my fifth grade uncle was responsible for the largest manumission in U.S. history. But his son re-enslaved people and raped virgins. So, I can't talk about that legacy. It's not pure. It's not necessarily something to be proud of. So, but often people hide in that kind of thing as well. It's important to look at all sides. So I appreciate that, Bob. Carol, you're back.
I am, and I just want to say, maybe kind of continuing on the same theme that if people have not yet looked at the book that's the a report of the Reparations Council of the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice and this is New Jersey, so this is very specific to what many of us have as our surroundings, and it goes beautiful job of historical research on the enslavement, and then through the latter 18th century and 19th century, I mean, the Reconstruction, and beyond that and into the Civil Rights Movement. It is a hope that this kind of information. Now, let me just tell you that if you go on njisj.org, New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, the document is front and center. You can click on it. You can read the entire thing. You can contact them and even probably get a copy of this incredibly produced 200-page report. I just want to let that be known because we want to be ready as opportunities are going to come, we hope together to find some different ways of repairing the harm.
Thank you, Carol. We have one more question in the audience and two more questions in the audience. And then we're going to go to the breakout sessions.
Oh,
Hello. I want to ask a kind of a philosophical question, and I'm asking for your opinion. Does African Americans, etc., who are related to European American slave owners have any responsibilities with regard to their lineage, even if they have not benefited from their ancestors' behavior?
Well, they're inheriting a legacy of extreme pain and tragedy, right? Because their ancestor was raped by an enslaver. So for most African Americans I know, they acknowledge that they probably descend from enslavers and enslaved people. The average African American has at least 20% European DNA. So that's pretty universal. But I would not think that they were responsible for that legacy because it was forced upon them. It's not a voluntary relationship.
Well, the reason I ask that question is, I've done my DNA. I'm a naturalized American. My ancestry is from the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean slavery was many times worse than American slavery because most slaves in the Caribbean only lived for approximately 8 years. So they were actually worked to death.
Right. That was the strategy.
Right. And now that I've found out about my European ancestry that lived in the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
some of whom were the richest people in the Caribbean, it's obvious that they had participated in some way or fashion.
Yep.
It's almost impossible not to.
Mm-hmm.
So, the question is, now that's the struggle. How do you, I don't believe in I don't believe in guilt, because I don't think it's a positive emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now this what you're doing here, it doesn't deal with European American or people European. It deals with just about everybody now.
Right.
And the question and so this question is going to blow up. And the big political thing is that it's difficult to make the larger community feel responsible, because the first thing they're going to feel is that negative emotion of guilt.
Right.
And this is going to really have a negative effect on what you're trying to do. So, I'm just putting that out. I'm not asking for an answer, but you can answer it if you want.
Well, I know that so the Europeans, English, French, who participated in slavery in the Caribbean, have taken longer to get to some of this because they never had large populations of enslaved people in their home countries. I mean, we've had to face it much more directly, and obviously the legacy is very direct. And what I'm finding, there's a movement in England that's been led by the Trevelyan's and the folks who own The Guardian. It's just an example. And they've never visited the Caribbean. They've never interacted with anyone who descends from people they enslaved. They're just sending checks to the government through a consortium. And to me, that's inadequate. I don't think this is just write a check kind of thing. And it's not clear where the money's going, to be honest. And in France, they're just beginning to get around this. And they just created a woman from Linked Descendants just went to Nantes. And there's a new museum in Nantes that is acknowledging the French role in enslavement in the Caribbean. And so the next question will be, what does that entail? What does that reparations look like? And governments take a long time to get around to this, but as individuals, people are starting to make these connections. But you're right, it's a harder thing, it's more remote. I mean, I can just hop on a plane and go to Virginia and meet descendants of people in my family enslaved. Um, I think there's a lack of familiarity. And as you said, the mortality rates were really high. So it varies. I found that by putting a full family tree on Ancestry and labeling my ancestors enslavers, and where I knew names in some cases, Ancestry doesn't really help you attach a list of enslaved people. They want to have official relationships, and they keep changing their minds about whether we can change those relationships. But I found people on Ancestry found me, and just labeling people enslavers. So it might be that, and so, I don't know. I don't know if it would be helpful or not, but the other project that's really diving into this is WikiTree. They're trying to build, WikiTree is a free genealogical service. You have to kind of do your research elsewhere and then post the tree with the facts on WikiTree. But they're trying to create one tree for all humans, whereas in Ancestry, everybody has their own tree. So there's thousands of trees, and you find out who's really the same people, but they're not all on one tree. And the U.S. Black Heritage Project, so there it is, U.S. based for now, is trying to document and record the names of everyone who was ever enslaved in the United States and see if they can start building those individual family trees. And then you might have some success with DNA if that interested you, whether or not you'd ever connect with a white cousin who currently lives in France, England, wherever it is, Belgium, wherever it is that your ancestors are from.
I think one of the things that we have to also look at is the systemic aspects, and that we have to do this reckoning as a city, as a state, as a nation, right?
Right.
And I think Carol brought up the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice report, and that is super important. In Princeton, I mean, there were enslaved people in Princeton as well. And then since then, like, we have seen evidence of difficulty in treating everybody as equal, especially the Black residents, and harms continue to happen. And I think reparations is a way for all of us to actually reckon with the past so that we can get to an equitable society going forward. So it's not just, like you said, it's not just about writing a check. It's about how do we transform, right? To that end, the Truth and Transformation Committee in Not Town is looking into exactly these aspects. Right now we are looking at the history as relates to education, housing, employment, entrepreneurship, all these things, to kind of try to figure out, what really has happened. Because in many times in this town, we can be very polished and not really touch on the real issues, right? And some of it's not even guilt at this point. I think it's just that we don't even know that we don't want to go there. That's more to the point, right? So I think that's something that we have to look at. And Truth and Transformation Committee, we are doing some of the work in Not Town. Look out for some articles that we're writing in the near future about education. More will come. But I think this history has to be reckoned with. There is no other way to move forward. Otherwise, more MAGAs will happen, more of all this will happen, because you just keep slipping back into old ways of thinking.
Yeah, and that's where hearing stories, people's stories is so important. I wanted to flag for you all, there's a group called Liberation Ventures, and they have got a belief arc focused on reparations. And it kind of helps to see where people are along the way. So if one extreme is opposition, they believe slavery does not impact the present, no change is needed. If someone's at that point, it's really hard to move them. But maybe with a little education, they can acknowledge that slavery and its legacies impact the present. And then that it goes all the way through the steps to reparations are possible taking action for recent harms locally is easier for people to grasp than national reparations for historic harms, right? So current harms and historic harms. And they have a couple of articles. I recommend trying to track it down, the reparations belief arc, they call it. And I found it helpful just to kind of understand when you're talking to someone, if you kind of know where they are on the chart, then you don't get too far ahead talking about the issue. But definitely we need to broaden people's understanding of reparations beyond cash. And in California, we had this huge reparations task force. They had a 1,100-page report of all the harms, and they had 115 recommendations. One recommendation was a cash payout, but it was deliberately not the first one. And the New York Times covered that report saying California calls for cash reparations. I mean, they just are so reductive.
Yeah.
And everyone, our feeling here in California is if you give people cash, you're going to spend it in a system that's working against you systemically. So we have to change the systems, education, criminal justice, on and on. We have to figure out how to change these systems, and then the cash would actually be more worthwhile. Or you figure out a way to give free college education or free, home down payments for a new home, whatever kind of things you can do. So, that's good to know, Maria Cruz, that they're working with you already. So it's a constant struggle. That's why in the meantime, I just try to do what I can in these other ways. And there are ways person to person to do some of these smaller actions as we kind of wait for, and we're trying to do stuff in California, but you're not supposed to do anything race-based, right? We outlawed affirmative action. There was talk originally that we were going to try to challenge that Bakke ruling that outlawed affirmative action, because if you could change that, you'd be able to do a lot of other things. But with this Supreme Court, nothing's going to happen.
Okay, with that, we can't thank you enough, Allison. This has really been just incredible.
Great. I enjoyed it. Thank you. I'm just putting my email. Someone asked me how to get in touch with me.
Okay, all right, so I see Allison just put her email address up in the chat, so you can get in touch with her. But thank you once again. So I think we want to move into breakout rooms as we don't have that much time. Let me just go over the questions really quickly. What do you think you would lose if dedicated yourself to repairing the harms of slavery by spending down wealth or fighting for reparations or some other action? Question number 2, and what would you hope to gain? And number 3, are there skeletons in your family closet that need to be brought into the light? What would happen if you did? So I didn't go over the community agreements, but I just ask you to listen to each other respectfully and give everyone the opportunity to speak. Okay, so now if you're in the library, we'll form a couple of circles so we can have discussions. And if you're on Zoom, we'll be moving you into breakout rooms. Thank you, everybody.
And we'll come back together after.
Yeah, and we'll come back together around 8:20, so please stay on. 7:20.
No, 7:20.
So please stay on so we can connect back together. Thank you. Okay, so that's...
Take away was that. Okay.
Stimulate.
Okay.
You're in the right town for that.
Young man.
Describing better. This Julian. Teenage. What is it? Want to get done what they would like. This is why we answer. You don't understand. I then this nation to a variety of ethnicities. But with trying to prove us, and very long. I found that I had no idea here. I had no idea either. It's different. It's different. Different. This is a more palatable. No, no.
I have the unhappy job of bringing everyone back together. Everyone's having a great conversation. I'm sure everyone in the breakout sessions was also stopped mid conversation. So I apologize for that. As Shelley Krause always says, it's it's a good sign when people are sort of feel like pulled back from the conversation. They still want to keep talking. So thank you all for playing and coming back from the conversations that you were having. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library, and I'm the liaison for Not in Our Town Princeton. We had a lively discussion, a thoughtful discussion here in the room. And I'm sure that you did as well in the virtual breakout sessions. I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to share something from the conversations that you had or any reflections you have from Allison's really thoughtful presentation. Please let me know. You can either, if you're online, just raise your hand or speak forth, or in the room, just raise your hand. But please, if you're in the room, know that it's important that you speak into the microphone. Otherwise, the people who are online won't be able to hear you. Does anyone want to share? Auntie Joyce, everyone's looking at you per usual. Okay, you're getting a mic. Is it green?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, Allison, I cannot thank you so much for your presentation to begin with, and the fact that it's important to know where people are on that scale. I forgot the name of it. The scale that you were talking about, the liberation.
With the
Liberation Ventures Belief Arc, Reparations Belief Arc. And I think someone,
Believe arc.
I think there's a link in the chat someone found, or
Okay, that's what I need to know. Okay, thank you so much. And I'm still processing everything that you shared, and I have to admit, the cruelty that people were faced with, it's unbelievable. And yet we're still here. So that says a lot about resilience. So thank you again.
there's a gentleman behind you. Yeah. Could you lean forward? Thank you.
I came to this gathering with the idea that I had to deal with finding out after living for 70 years, not knowing that I had, I couldn't tell for sure that I had any European ancestry, except for my grandmother who was Irish. And that was just recent, so I'm sure she wasn't involved in slavery. But having found out about, the deep roots of my European ancestry and perhaps their involvement in slavery to some degree, participated in it, it's even though I didn't benefit from any of their ill gains, right? There was some place along the way that there was a separation, and without getting the benefits, you still want to know, you still wrestle with this. And one of the things that I gained from having come here is that how will I use, or how will anybody use this kind of knowledge? And the thing I'm taking away from this, my takeaway, is to transform each of us for the better.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone online who'd like to share how the conversations from their room, either one or two, some sort of reflections? I don't know, Kimmy, are you still there? I saw that
This
you were.
is Ted Fetter. I thought in our
Ted.
group we had a wonderful discussion. There were 6 of us total, and everybody took part. I felt very good about the discussion. I don't know if any of the individuals want to offer something that they shared or that they learned.
Thank you, Ted.
I would share that one member of our group felt very strongly that we shouldn't put cash reparations off the table. That, as she said, all the other groups got cash. Why not Black people?
We had an interesting conversation in our group around what white people stand to lose besides just spending down wealth. One of our group participants said, if she thinks about what she would lose if she fought for reparations, or if she had the wealth to spend down, she would lose fear. Right, which I thought was a great response, and it led to the conversation around understanding that white people live with a burden of, this unwritten rule of white silence, right? Like if we don't talk about it, we don't have to acknowledge it, and our brilliant speaker, Allison, spoke to that, right? When you break that rule and you become loud about understanding white supremacy and understanding the horrific legacy of the enslavement of Black African Americans in the transatlantic slave trade, you lose things. You lose standing in communities, you lose family members, you lose friends. And that is a courageous thing to do, and not many white people are comfortable doing that, right? But the flip side is, there is to be gained. Because you gain a sense of responsibility, and you gain a sense of hopefulness when you begin to right wrongs. And so we had an interesting conversation around that. We also talked about really understanding wealth, right? Like some people have genuine wealth where they could not spend it in 10 lifetimes, or their children and grandchildren couldn't spend it in 10 lifetimes, right? But those of us who may not be wealthy, quote unquote, what is the other work that we can do, and what would we lose doing that? And as Black folks, we have nothing to lose by doing the work, but it is a burden, when we do the work to try and undo our own oppression, especially since our oppression is so public and so visible that it's just normalized, right? So I personally shared that I appreciated the fact that these questions were very much geared towards white people. I know our conversations are usually centered around Black and Brown, as it should be. But when we talk about undoing the burden, that's where we really need to hear more white voices. And so I really appreciate the questions that Allison curated.
Thank you, Kimmy. I just lifting up your comment about someone saying that they would lose fear, that framing of it. I also appreciated how Allison spoke about how her family was fractured and began to repair even the familiar relations in this process of more outward-looking reparation. Does anyone else want to offer anything or reflections?
It looks
Yes.
like Barbara Fox's hand is
Okay.
up.
Yes. Thank you, Kimmy. Barbara, I don't know if you took your hand down on purpose. Or you still
Yes.
want to?
No, I just wanted to thank Allison for giving white people a kind of a formula for what to do. So some of us are wondering, how do we how do we decide what to do and when to do it? And I honor your kids for saying, okay, we're okay with not getting that when you die. And also a way of figuring out mathematically, or just a tool for figuring out just what is it that I can afford to give and still be able to take care of myself in later years. And where did that come from? So that was very useful, and I appreciated that.
Thank you, Barbara. Sindhu?
I think one of the things that Allison brought up also was about greed. Like, I mean, how did all this impact their family? And I think as a system, as a nation, we are also built on that ethos, right? Like we have to accumulate individually. It's not communally, so that it's my stuff kind of a thing. And I think that's where this reckoning for me is super important, because we have to get back to what does rich mean, right? I mean, in terms of, is it just money we are looking at, or material things? And I think that's one of those things that, like, if you want to lose the fear, you also have to lose that greed somewhat. And I don't think, and some of the fear is this individuality is like, hey, I have to take care of myself. The world won't take care of me kind of thing. That's also built into us. So I think all this requires, like, really us as a nation sitting together and talking about who we want to be, really, as a nation, not a group of individuals going after as much as we can.
Thank you so much. I think this conversation, well, firstly, Allison, I want to thank you again for your presentation. For your thought leadership. And also, I think it's very helpful for people, as Barbara said, to have a path forward, something that, a practical application of things that people can do individually and collectively. I think that everybody felt, or at least from what I was hearing back, that there was something that they were able to take from it, something that was meaningful, whether that's, a personal way of reframing how they're going to move forward. So thank you. And I want to thank everybody here who participated in these conversations and shared thoughtfully and meaningfully. And thank you all for coming together as always. And our partners, Not in Our Town, Princeton. Thank you. Oh, and I am supposed to, thank you. And I am supposed to mention, or I get to mention, that on June 13th, we are partnering with African Link Initiative and Not in Our Town Princeton for a program called Sankofa Table. So please look at the library's calendar for June 13th. That's an in-person only event. So, but there will be lunch from the Scotch Bonnet. So it's definitely worth coming for free. Good food and good conversation. So I hope those of you who are in the area will be able to join us. Again, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Allison Thomas. One last round of applause for Allison. And for all of you too, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Goodbye.